If you've ever studied the conditions of the Second World War beyond the big battles and generals, you know one thing stands out: filth. In the trenches, jungles, and deserts, men lived shoulder to shoulder with mud, rats, lice, and infection. Soap wasn't just about staying clean, it was survival. When supply lines broke and rations ran out, soldiers and civilians alike had to rediscover one of humanity's oldest chemical arts, making soap from scratch using ashes, fat, and patience. By 1942, soap production across Europe was collapsing. Animal fats, a key ingredient, were rationed for explosives and lubricants. The Allies used glycerin from soap making to make gunpowder. The Axis powers stripped tallow and lard supplies for fuel. Civilians were left to fend for themselves, and soldiers often went weeks without resupply. In field hospitals and makeshift camps, infections spread like wildfire. Dysentery, trench foot, and lice outbreaks were constant threats. Military medics quickly realized that improvised soap making wasn't just resourceful, it was essential. WWII troops, especially in remote areas like the Pacific and Eastern fronts, began reintroducing an old pioneer practice, turning animal fat and campfire ashes into crude but effective soap. Soap making might sound like survival folklore, but it's simple chemistry. The reaction between fatty acids from animal fat and alkali from ashes. The process is called saponification. Soldiers and civilians didn't need a chemistry degree. They learned by smell, feel, and fire. Here's how it worked in practice, step by step. Destaten de borsasadum rigor inundatum puri were pinabimer statum gobi setin. Same method you could reproduce today with nothing but basic supplies. You start with hardwood ashes, not softwoods. Oak, hickory, or beech gave the strongest alkali. Soldiers poured these ashes into a metal bucket or barrel with a small hole near the bottom. Then they slowly poured rainwater through the ashes. The water that dripped out wasn't ordinary water anymore. It was lye, a weak solution of potassium hydroxide. It felt slippery to the touch and could dissolve grease. Field medics sometimes tested lye strength the same way pioneers did. Barjaim. Drop in and done. And dime, so timid and done, then drying, bersor. If it dissolved, the lye was strong enough. Too weak and the soap wouldn't set. Too strong and it would burn skin. This crude science, passed down orally or through field manuals, worked remarkably well. The next step was to extract usable fat. Any animal source worked: beef, pork, even poultry, or fish. Soldiers boiled leftover scraps and skimmed the clear layer of fat that rose to the top. In occupied cities, civilians gathered kitchen scraps, old bones, and even candle remnants. Fat became as valuable as ammunition. In London and Berlin alike, government posters urged people to save your fat for the war effort. Once rendered, the fat was strained through cloth to remove impurities, producing a pale, oily liquid ready for the next step. This is where the magic, and honestly, the danger, happened. Soldiers carefully mixed the lye solution with melted fat over low heat. The trick was to add lye slowly, stirring constantly with a stick. Too much at once, and the mixture could foam violently, or even explode. As the two combined, they thickened into a creamy paste, the beginnings of soap. After simmering and stirring for an hour or two, the mixture was poured into tins, wooden molds, or even helmets and left to cure for several days. Once hardened, the result wasn't pretty. It was gray, gritty, and smelled faintly of smoke. But, it worked. It stripped grime, killed bacteria, and even helped control lice when rubbed directly into clothing seams. Improvised soap became a quiet hero in World War II field medicine. On the Eastern Front, Soviet nurses used it to disinfect wounds when alcohol ran out. In the Pacific, United States troops used it to scrub gear and hands before treating jungle rot. One documented case from a British medical unit in Burma showed that units using handmade soap had 40% fewer skin infections than units without. Beyond the front lines, civilian populations relied on the same method to survive urban collapse. In occupied France and Poland, underground soap makers bartered crude soap as currency. It was often more valuable than cigarettes or coffee. It's easy to dismiss ash and fat soap as a relic, but in a world that's, increasingly vulnerable to supply chain breakdowns and resource shortages, it's a lesson worth remembering. Soap making teaches two critical wartime lessons: self-reliance and chemical literacy. The same knowledge that kept World War II troops alive can help modern survivalists, off-grid homesteaders, or anyone caught in disaster zones without sanitation. In fact, several survival schools today teach the World War II-style field soap method because it's completely sustainable. Everything needed, ashes, fat, water, and patience, can be found or made anywhere on Earth. For those looking to try it today, modern safety gear, like gloves and goggles, make it much safer. Even a basic campfire setup can produce usable soap within a few hours. It won't look or smell like the stuff on store shelves, but it will protect you when it matters most. After the war, industrial soap production roared back with synthetics and fragrances. The gritty gray bars of the 1940s became a memory, and the skills behind them faded with the veterans who practiced them. But the science never stopped working. When modern historians and survivalists recreate World War II-era field life, they often rediscover this method and realize just how advanced it really was. In chemistry terms, World War II soldiers were performing field-level alkali reactions with no instruments, no training, and complete success. They turned waste into hygiene, death into survival. If you're a history enthusiast or a prepper who values old-world skills that actually work, keep digging into stories like this. World War II wasn't just fought with rifles and tanks, it was won with brains, chemistry, and the ability to adapt. Subscribe to Strange History for more forgotten fieldcraft from the men and women who survived history's hardest years, not by luck, but by skill.